Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here with the Tarot of the Golden Wheel. I have kind of hemmed and hawed about this deck for some time. It's a beautiful deck, and I finally pulled the trigger, obviously. That's why we're here. What's going to happen on your screen is that it's going to be scrolling through the cards 3 at a time. But I am a lazy video editor, so I am not going to be taking the time to exactly match my comments as I speak with the cards that are on the screen. So you can pop back and forth with them if you want to. In general, I hope watching things on the screen will give you a feel for the deck and my commentary as well, even if they're not in sync. So, beautiful artwork on this deck. The guidebook is actually perfect bound, so it's glued. It's not the staple bound, so it's a nice little guidebook, but not terribly meaty in terms of card definitions. For the major arcana, there's more, and it sometimes refers to maybe a little of the Slavic myth that goes with the card, but it's not very, it doesn't go into it too deeply, which is kind of a shame. But I will say this for the guidebook: it's got nice large type, so it's quite readable. In the guidebook, they also have keywords for every one of the cards. So this actually could work quite well as a beginner deck, actually, even though it departs some, I think, from the Rider-Waite-Smith. Let me see where it talks about the background of this deck, which is Slavic. Also the suits: water is cups, air is swords, fire is wands, earth is pentacles, but it's called wheels. Is that the only one that departs? One that departs? We just have cups, wheels, wands. I guess it is. Why they chose to do that, I don't know, because there are places where that falls down. That doesn't, I think it was the 7 of wheels that particularly visually didn't make any sense. Most of the time it does. It works okay, but so let's see here. In creating this deck, the artist's vision of the tarot arcana was influenced by traditional Russian fairy tales. Without using specific characters, the author conveys the spirit of the Slavic tale, where the hero passes a series of tests in order to finally find happiness. Very often the protagonist of the narrative is Ivan the Fool, a man who looks at the world differently than other people. He is naive, bold, noble, and full of energy. On the road, he meets guides from another world, the so-called faraway kingdom, good helpers, powerful enemies, and talking beasts. At the end of the journey, the main treasure is love, as well as transformation of the soul. In another place it says, Slavic folklore is rich in legends about wise, speaking animals, sacred groves, the life-giving power of the sun, and the mysterious night luminary, the moon. So there's more of this archetypal energy in here, actually kind of pagan energy, I would say, in this deck than I originally anticipated, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think The suits are very tied to seasons. And let me flip through the deck here in my hands for a second. Like, the wheels are, to me, autumnal, not uncommon in the worlds of tarot for the pentacles to be associated with autumn, primarily wheat, the production of wheat. Although I see here there's cards like the Five of Wheels where it's winter. And then the Wands appear to be summer. The Cups, well, maybe the Wands are spring and the Cups are summer. And then the Swords are not exclusively winter, but mostly winter. So it's not, each suit is not completely true to a season, it looks like. All right, so now let me take a look at the cards. I would say the Fool is largely traditional, as is the Magician. However, the High Priestess is quite different. And she's really interesting in comparison to the Empress. So it's almost like the High Priestess is the priestess of the night, or maybe the evening and the dawn, those liminal times, whereas the Empress is the goddess of the day. But there's very much a sense of the High Priestess being, I don't know, to me she's more a goddess figure than she is a person. And there's something of that also with the Empress. So one of my original objections to this deck is the Empress and the Emperor. Because the Empress looks like she's, she's got breasts, so she's out of childhood, but she looks extremely young. And the Emperor is not merely mature, he's much older with his, and very traditional Christian godlike looking. He's got a bird of prey, it looks like, on a gloved hand, so it would be a bird of prey. And he's up in like a rocky high ground, again, kind of a Jehovah-like, or Zeus on Mount Olympus or something like that. Whereas the Empress is down in the fields, in the forest. And so there was such a disconnect between the Empress and the Emperor that I had a bit of a problem with that. But now that I have the deck in hand, I see that they're completely different. I mean, not even like opposites to be joined. They're like completely different. They're just completely different. So there would be no, in a suit or in a spread where the two of these turn up, I would not say anything in terms of like, you have a match here between an Empress and an Emperor, because these are two completely different energies. You could say that within yourself, that there are two energies within yourself that maybe need to be balanced. But to me, there's no wedding. There's no. They're completely separate. And then the Hierophant, again, there's this interesting juxtaposition between the High Priestess and the Empress. Again, that liminal, and she's very green. The High Priestess is in this very green place, and the Empress is in the wheat is the primary thing, the flaming yellow wheat, that productivity, that reaching, that culmination there. And so between those two, night and day, literally, and then between the Emperor and the Hierophant, the Emperor being up in this very barren, rocky environment, pretty much surrounded by clouds. There's none of the ram energy here. It's kind of the Emperor as overseer kind of a thing. And then the Hierophant is down in the trees with these sort of totem things in the background and greenery everywhere. So the Hierophant, he also has the white hair, older, although still clearly very healthy and fit. But yeah, a creature of the forest, a god of the forest. So that was just, so this aspect, again, if you are pagan or animist or following a very nature-centered spiritual path, this deck could suit you very well. And then the Lovers also has, it's a more traditional choice type of Lovers, where you have an older woman who actually looks older than the man's mother, and looking in one direction as though she would lead him in one direction, and she has a scroll in her hand, and there's wheat all around her, springing up around her. And then you have the younger woman with a cup in her hand, so appealing to his emotions, walking off in another direction that actually has no, is barren, is rocky. To me, that would be the unknown. So for him, it's kind of the known or the unknown, the safe or the risky. And then at the bottom of the card, there's a snake that's coiled and looks like it's ready to strike the heel of the young woman. So certainly there's mother jealousy type stuff being depicted here. But I feel like that figure, the older woman, is more than just the mother, because the mother or provider, because she's got that scroll in her hand. So it's a more interesting card, I think, than a lot of traditional Lovers cards. The Chariot is fairly conventional, with black and white horses pulling the chariot. The Strength card is fairly traditional, with a bear instead of a lion, and the woman actually sitting on the bear and looking contemplative. She's got something in her hand that I can't see. I mean, she might be offering a berry or something to the bear. I don't have a magnifying glass here, so I'm not sure. I don't think it's like a ring on her finger or something. The Hermit is quite traditional, although it looks like, again, he has something in his hand. It looks like, actually, instead of a lantern, so this is different. It's similar in the sense that it's a person in a robe, but it's not a super old man. His beard still has color, so he's maybe middle-aged, and it looks like it's a firefly that's in his hand. And it looks like there are berries where he's sitting, and that it might be either raining or snowing around him. The sky is very cloudy. So again, with that firefly instead of a lantern, very nature-based. And this Hermit appears not just to be traveling through, but to be very comfortable within that environment. The Wheel of Fortune is similar to the Fates. So this is one of the things where it's unfortunate that there isn't a little more information about the Slavic traditions. And I don't remember exactly even the Greek myth, but I thought they were all working from one thread in the Fates, in the Greek Fates. These are weaving two separate threads from two separate, what they're doing is they're spinning. So they're spinning the thread from two different types of wool, which you see at the top of the card. One is gray wool and the other is like an orangey red wool. So essentially it appears to be life and death. Each side of the card is quite different, although it looks like on the death side it's actually poppies that are there, whereas there's fruit on the life side. So it's just, again, all more interesting than I was expecting from this deck. And it's a cheap deck. That's part of the reason I finally pulled the trigger. I think it's under $20 when I checked, but Justice, we're moving on to Justice now, has acorns down at the bottom of the card, oak acorns, and she's holding a crystal. So it's kind of weird because she appears to be holding a crystal, like it's not a quartz point, so I'm not sure, or it may even be like a cinder because it appears to be smoking. And then she's got a sword in front of her face. So there's some symbolism here that at first glance I'm not completely understanding. Does it describe the card at all? Give us anything in here about what this thing is in her hand, whether it's a stone. Justice, they're calling trial. So that's interesting. So it's a little different than referring to objectivity. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just read this. Blessed is the man who did not rebel against the truth, did not sin, and did not betray. He does not know painful remorse. He is not afraid of exposure. He lives in peace with himself. He will not be shaken by anyone else's penetrating gaze, and he will not be afraid of righteous judgment. Listen to the voice of your conscience. Do you keep dark and shameful secrets? Will you withstand the trial? Stand before justice. Here is a shining sword in the hands of a judge, a sign of law, strict and just. She punishes criminals and protects the weak. So maybe that coal there is to punish somebody. Ah, yes, okay. She punishes criminals and protects the weak. The hot iron ore is a test of God's judgment. If you are noble and pure, the sword will not touch you, and the iron will not burn your hands. If you forget about honor, loyalty, and mercy, then you will pay your debt in full. This card reminds us that the world must remain in equilibrium. Very appropriately here, you didn't hear it, but I hear thunder. I feel like that description was worthy of a little thunder. Something is approaching. I may have to pause and return to this. I may have to get online and make sure. 'Tis the season of crazy, deadly storms here in good old Alabama. So it's important to be watchful when the skies start to rumble, to get online and check some radar. But I'm going to do at least one more here. I'll see if I can get through the major arcana. And then I'll take a break, and hopefully it will be seamless, because I'll just meld the recordings when I create the video. So the Hanged Man is a little bit different because he's underwater, and there it looks like actually a coelacanth or an eel. And so he's like kind of tied in twine and is kind of drifting down into river or sea grasses here in the Hanged Man. And they call it the abyss. So how interesting. You freeze, you humble yourself in the underwater prison. You are ready to accept this death. You're ready to surrender. But in the depths of your soul there lives the hope of liberation. As a prisoner dreams of escaping, you also dream of a swallow of sweet air that you breathe on the surface. If you can tear the bonds, this trial will be a lesson in the love of life. So there, you know, it's another trial. The Death card is a skull, like a deer, or yeah, it would be like a deer skull. And there's something growing out of the eye socket, so I think it's cool. It's a beautiful card. The skies in this deck and some of the background appear to be watercolor and are just really, really beautiful. Temperance is a man, and I don't know if it's like he's got a dove on his head, or I don't think so. I think it's just an opening in the far. He's surrounded by a pretty tight, dense forest, but there appears to be an opening in the distance, and he's standing in water with two separate jugs that apparently he's going to fill. But there's nothing in terms of like mixing the two things in the jugs. His feet are actually standing in two different colors of water within the pool that he's in. So there are two different trees behind him, so it's not like this is Yggdrasil, you know, and the pool of the Norns or anything, so I'm not sure what this is referring to. The devil has nothing in chains. He has a knife, and he's going to cut a flower. Now this, so it's like temptation, and again, it's one of the trials. So the majors are a little bit different. So the devil, it still says captivity, but it says this card tells us that our souls are killed by consuming passions, burning desires, pride, and self-destructive desire to achieve at all costs. According to an old Slavic legend, on the night of the marriage of the water and the sun, the one who finds the magic flower of the fern will be granted full knowledge of everything in the world. He will be able to see the treasures underground, to read the thoughts of other people, and will gain power over evil spirits. But this magical flower is guarded by an evil force, and the one who tries to abduct it from the forest awaits a terrible trial. Enraged spirits will drive him mad and will send horrible visions that will kill if the brave man turns around to look at them. So what you have depicted on the card, I'm not sure if there are spirits. No, it just looks like trees behind him. But there's a fire that's rising up behind him. But he's there with the knife, and he's facing the flower. So quite different from the usual devil. The tower is like a big house on fire, a big Slavic house on fire. The star is the usual star, a lovely star. It's nice that she's actually not nude. I have nothing against nudity, but I think it's a little limiting in terms of putting the images on the internet. The moon is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. We're reduced to one animal, which is a wolf howling at the moon. But the whole energy of the moon is fantastic. The sun, the child on the pony seems a little bit older. Doesn't seem as odd. Judgment is like a swan maiden. There's a woman who, in the guidebook, I had looked this up earlier, in the guidebook it's a swan turning into a woman. So, but there's nothing else about that. I don't know if the story of the Swan Maidens is a Slavic story, so I don't know if that's what it's referring to. The world card is similar to a world tree in the sense that the branches of the tree represent all of the seasons. So you have green, yellow, red, and barren branches, and you have the moon on the left and the sun on the right of the card, and you have the maiden, the mother, and the crone on the standing around holding hands. So, a beautiful card. Then we're into the suit of wheels, which is the ace is represented with an ox, which works for me. The two of wheels is, again, balancing act, a little different. There's a more linear aspect to the card than in a Rider-Waite-Smith because he's got one wheel below him under a foot that he's balancing on, and then one above. And it looks like he has maybe snow geese behind him. So sometimes the trees, like when we get to the court cards, the trees in the court cards, or the background in the court cards, make a difference. Like, I'm just going to go through here. The wheels, well, they still seem like weeping willows. So maybe the ones, well, they're a different color. In the cups, it's clearly weeping willow foliage that is accompanying the card. It's in the backgrounds of the court cards. In the swords, it's nothing but the sky. So I'm not sure what tree this is. It's going to have to, it's again, dangly foliage. Dangly foliage tree, but I don't know what. So it's not an oak. I don't think that's birch foliage either, which I think of as being more rounded, more like aspen. But and I think the wands, we don't have trees either. We just have what to me looks like poppies. So you're more focused on the ground than the sky. All right, the 3 doesn't show cooperation. It shows somebody working on something detailed, but there's nobody else involved. The person is looking off to one side as though there might be somebody there telling him something. The 4 is pretty classic, stressing kind of the greed aspect. The 5 is pretty classic, showing deprivation with all of the wheels kind of being used to form a last fire for yourself. The 6, again, pretty classic, with somebody who has plenty giving to a child. It is interesting, though, that behind the person is a woman who seems to have gathered a bunch of apples or fruit of some kind, that behind her there's a gate that is essentially like a wall gate. There's a barrier In other words, there's a literal barrier keeping the people who don't have from getting the things that would sustain them. So that's an interesting addition to the card. Here's the Seven of Wheels. What I had said earlier is kind of a stretch, which is that he's like, it looks like he has planted the wheels in the ground and is expecting them to grow. It's a very strange card. The 8 is pretty classic, with somebody working to create some things and the things he's already created being hung above him. The 9 of Wheels, the woman doesn't have a hawk, she has a rooster. So I'm not sure what that is denoting. And the wheels are up in the tree, and the trees are red. So there's a little different symbology there. The 10 of Wheels, I think is a little bit lacking. There's the wheel decorations and an arch above the head of a couple and a dog. And each person of the couple is holding a little wheel. But there's no sense of legacy, there's no children, there's no older people. These look like people in their 30s. So there's, less of a sense of legacy there. Definitely a sense of structure, but not the legacy. All of the court cards, the people are wearing green. And it's kind of difficult because at first I was thinking, this is so bright that it's more like the wands. So you have to just look at the color of the clothing that they're wearing. So there's wheat fields all around that are bright yellow, orange. They're the knight of I'm even saying wands, of wheels is actually on an orange horse that is, going quickly, walking, but going maybe trotting. Not at all the usual Knight of Pentacles, but they are all wearing green. They're all wearing green. The Queen of Wheels, again, just the look on her face strikes me as more Queen of Wands, but she is at a spinning wheel. No little rabbit, nothing like that. And then the King of Wheels. So there's, and then the next card is the Ace of Wands, which is very bright and has the rooster, which was featured in the 9 of Wheels. So again, a bit of a contradiction there. The 2 of Wands is 2 rams crashing together. So to me it looks like there's a fire in the background, actually. And in this, it looks like it's late summer, where like the wheat is actually on the ground and is being trampled on, for the winnowing process and all of that. The 3 of Wands shows a young man with his hand up as though he's waving to somebody, saying, "I'm coming. Wait for me, I'm coming, I see you." So quite a bit different. But then we hit the 4, and the 4 is very traditional, except it's leaning more toward the marriage ceremony aspect instead of maybe a community celebration, because there are only 2 people on it. The 5 of Wands, again, is competition, pretty traditional. Although only 2 of the people are battling, and then the 3 others are kind of watching or egging them on. It's clearly friendly competition. The 6 of Wands is like conquest. So it's not victory in being hailed when you return. There's a person with a flag, but there are fires in the background. And then the 6 wands, or 5 of the wands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the wands are laying on the ground. So again, it's conquest. It's like we have conquered, and we're waving our flag. So it almost has more of a 5 of Swords feel to it. The 7 of Wands has what looks like some unhappy wolves in the foreground, but they seem almost detached from the rest of the image, which is somebody standing in front of an opening formed by 6 of the Wands, and he has a wand. So it's almost more 9 of Wands-ish in the sense of kind of guarding. The 8 of Wands shows somebody bursting through a barrier. It looks like from like a tilde or, yeah, kind of like a pasture or something. And he's rushing through with a wand up in a cloudy sky with lightning in the distance, and he's charging past this barrier into some other. So, the messenger aspect sort of comes across, but it's more, it seems like bursting through a barrier. Perhaps a barrier of convention into wilder grasses. The 9 of Wands is pretty typical, except he looks like he's walking as opposed to just holding his ground there. But definitely wounded warrior feel very strongly, kind of at his wit's end, at the end of his energy. And then the 10 of Wands is like nighttime, where the person carrying the wands is blindfolded, for one, and he's trying to cross a stream on the rocks while blindfolded in the dark. And he looks young, like in his teens or something. So it kind of follows the Rider-Waite-Smith, but not at all strictly. The Page of Wands could be female. There's a little gender ambiguity there. And the Wands courts wear orange. The Knight of Wands is quite recognizable. The Queen and the King are what you would expect. And again, the plant associated with the court seems to be poppies. The Queen doesn't have a black cat, she has a gray cat. I don't know if there's any particular significance to Slavic culture in that regard. The Cups starts with a very Piscean card with 2 fish on it. And it's funny because, again, you can see this as a potion, because there seems to be like smoke coming out of the cup and swirling down, up and then downward around, as opposed to the usual overflowing of water that we would see. The 2 of Cups is what you would expect, except the woman seems more enthusiastic, to be honest, than the man does in that particular 2 of Cups. It doesn't seem entirely equal. The 3 of Cups is very typical. The 4 of Cups is quite typical, except he has all of the 4 cups around him. He's not getting anything offered. And it looks like he has in his cap like a peacock feather. So there's sort of a hint there of using the third eye. It's the eye of the peacock there. The 5 of Cups is fairly typical, except there's 4 cups down and a 5th one waiting for him. He looks drunk. So it looks like he's drinking his sorrows away, and there's a red ribbon in one hand that's trailing into the picture, so it's like a commitment has been broken. It's almost like he was there for a hand fasting that didn't occur. Being abandoned by a loved one. The 6 of Cups is fairly traditional, but it's along the lines of the older woman and the child. In this case, an old woman and a child. Yes, an old woman and a child. So the old woman has decorated her hair with a crown of flowers, and she has done the same with what is probably a granddaughter. And I see that they're dandelions, so it's a dandelion crown. How cute, because it shows both the dandelion in seed and dandelions on the ground. So again, there are these nature touches that are really nice in this deck. 7 of Cups. Unfortunately, there's no hint of what's in the cups, so the meaning of this card could change considerably. So you have clouds, and then I don't know if this is true also of a Marseille deck. if there is water or any other figurative element in a Marseille 7 of Cups that connects them together. But in this one you have 3 at the top, and water from them is trailing down into 2 cups below them, and the water from those 2 cups is trailing down into 2 cups below them. And they have held that water. There's nothing out of the lower 2 cups. There is nothing trailing. So that to me requires some thought. It's a little bit different than a Rider-Waite-Smith 7 of Cups. The 8 of Cups is fairly traditional, except there's an eclipse, the moon eclipsing the sun, and most of the cups have been knocked down except for 2. So it does have a different feel to it. The 9 of Cups looks like wine in the cups, so that does have that aspect of ceremony, of celebration, of a toast to everyone in the room, and, the drinks are on me kind of a spirit. The 10 of Cups, the cups are actually on the woman's dress. They are decoration on the woman's dress. You've got what looks like peaches in the trees, and a little baby in the woman's arms, and like an Abyssinian cat or some kind of very proud-looking cat down at the foot of the couple. There's a couple here. So fairly traditional, but no rainbow. And just the start of the family, as opposed to 2 younger children. The Page of Cups looks a little bit alluring. Again, there's the Weeping Willow in all of the cups. Now here, the Knight of Cups is walking on a black horse instead of, normally the Page of Pentacles, I believe, is on a black horse. And usually I think the Page of Pentacles horse is standing still, and this one is just walking. And he's walking a different direction, I think, than in a normal Rider-Waite-Smith deck. The Queen of Cups has a swan behind her. But otherwise, she's a Queen of Cups. And the King of Cups is pretty traditional King of Cups as well. Now the Ace of Swords has a snake, a serpent on it in a knot. And I feel like I should be able to name that. Like if somebody knew sacred geometry, they might be able to name what kind of a knot this snake is tied up in. And the sword isn't piercing the snake, but it's like it's in the knot. It's within the knot. And the snake has its mouth menacingly open. The Two of Swords. This almost looks like a vision quest. So we're back to kind of the trial, because you've got two swords stuck in the ground on either side of a man who's on his knees. And there's a cord between the two swords, as though this man must stay in this particular position, or, can't go past the swords. And he's in front of water. And we see behind him it's the night and the moon. So it's like, a night vision quest. To me, that's what's coming across on this. Three of Swords, pretty traditional, no heart. Three swords in a triangular fashion stuck in the ground, very barren, dry ground, with a woman who seems tormented and a dark, tormented sky. Four of Swords, fairly traditional. We have poppies again. He almost looks like Knight Templar sort of a dress, his robes do. And the four swords are around him, marking out a place on the ground where he rests. So he's in the natural world, but protected. So we're without the sepulcher, and we're without the whole church association here. The Five of Swords has only two people in it, and neither of them look happy. One is down on his knees in the background. We've got crows. We have a murder of crows, maybe several murders of crows, flying in the background. One sword is broken, three are on the ground but still whole, and the figure in the foreground, presumably the victor, is holding a sword, but he also is downcast. So this is more like a no-win situation. So, yeah. So to me, the mean-spiritedness is taken out of this particular card. And in this card, it is winter time. We have snow on the ground. The Six of Swords. Now, the Six of Swords can be a little creepy anyway, because who is that man who is taking them on the boat across the water? In this case, almost more so. Their six swords are decorating the cloak of a man who is facing a body of water but still on land, and is leading a child away, and the child is looking back. So this is a little bit of a creepy Six of Swords, like another degree of creepy, but it could just be, again, like a point of initiation where you're leaving your family. This could be like a father taking his son to the boarding school, or but there's definitely a sense of leaving behind the familiar here, as opposed to in a Rider-Waite-Smith Six of Swords, leaving behind conflict for calmer waters. Here it's more like leaving the familiar as part of growing up. The Seven of Swords is definitely leans toward the thief. He's got all of the swords in a basket Don't ask me how he's doing that, especially since it seems like a shallow basket and there's all these swords sticking out. So the imagery doesn't quite work. And he's hiding behind kind of a scanty grove of trees, and it appears that there are 3 armed men looking for him, looking to reclaim the sword. So he's not in a very good position. The 8 of Swords, instead of down in like a floodplain area, and the city is really far, far in the distance. There's a grieving woman, and looks to be a woman of status. She's not at all bound. This is more like a lover's leap kind of a card, where you're so grief-stricken that you're going to end your life by walking off of a cliff. So that's where she is. She's on the edge of a cliff. There are swords buried, point down, on either side of her, and she's actually standing on a sword. So a dire, again, almost a more dire situation, because this person seems ready to do herself in. And she's got these like brambles behind her, kind of urging her on. So that could be a difficult card for somebody who suffers from depression or suicidal tendencies. That could be a difficult. Let me even see what it says in the book. So I'm leaning toward the 8 of Swords in this particular deck being a little bit dangerous. But here they just say 8 of Swords, trap. But it looks like she came here of her own free will. There's no sign that anything is preventing her. There's some brambles behind her, but big deal. She's got a sword under her feet. She could cut them with if she even needed to. She got there somehow. So there must be a way to turn around and go back. And all it says here is this card is warning of a dangerous and negative situation, unexpected incidents, hostile environment, lack of freedom, futile efforts. The energy is blocked, impotence and paralysis, the atmosphere of criticism, condemnation, stiffness, fears, confusion, communication problems. So kind of a traditional meaning. All right, the 9 of Swords, the person isn't in a bed and sleeping. They're out in the winter barefoot in the snow. Sitting up, not unlike a traditional 9 of Swords, with their hands on their head and the swords are in the sky. Those plaguing thoughts. And the 10 of Swords, I'm not sure how many swords are in the person's back. There might be 1. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are in the ground. And 2, it's ambiguous whether they're in the person's body or behind him. But he still has 1 sword, and he is crawling forward. Unfortunately, the light in the background appears to be the light of the battlefield. So it's almost like he's trying to rejoin the battle. Yeah. Yeah, because the light in the background, there's smoke, trails of smoke. The Page of Swords is fairly traditional, except he's facing the wind, which I think changes it quite a bit. In a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, the wind is at his back and he's turning around to face it. It's like what is blowing in on the wind. He's turning around to face it. But in this deck, he is already facing the wind with his sword ready to slash out at whatever is there. The Knight of Swords is very classic, surging forward on a charging horse. In this deck, one of the things I actually like about this deck is that the horses are well illustrated. It just has amazed me how crappy the horses are in most decks. In this deck, I really appreciate the illustration of the horses. And in this case, the horse actually has its ears pricked forward, like it is game for the challenge, as opposed to a Rider-Waite-Smith where the horse is dismayed by what is being asked of it. The Queen of Swords appears to have a raven on one arm. She also has a banner, a wand with a banner in one arm. She's wearing mail on her head, along with a crown and a plume. And she's holding a sword up. She looks quite formidable and uncompromising. But not mean or bitchy, but, you know, very much like, you know, like a justice card, you know. She's not here to comfort anybody. And the King of Swords is looking askance. He also has a scepter, in this case, and a sword. And we're at the conclusion. So yeah, the King of Swords looks like he's judging the person in front of him, calculating, perhaps even calculating what he can get away with, how formidable his foe is. I wanted to look through here and just see, you know, so the King and Queen of Swords are holding both their suit object, you know, the sword, and a scepter. So I'm just looking to see if in the others there's any of that. And there doesn't seem to be. Not in the wands. Oh, not in the cups. And so where are the wands? And the wands, of course, are holding a wand, but nothing else. So it seems like the swords are the only ones that are holding something other than their suit object. So that's curious. It's almost as though it gives them more authority. Of course, it's my usual 1 hour my usual 1 hour review of a deck. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some shuffling, which created such a breeze. It's a little bit stiff cardstock, but it created such a breeze that it blew something over on the other side of the table. I had a card, not a tarot card, but a note card, a greeting card type thing, propped up, and it blew over. So it's a little stiff. It's going to take some breaking in. A little stiff on the cardstock. I've got the Eight of Cups. St. Jennifer, you've been here an hour. Move along. The Hierophant. And there's that Justice card, the Trial. Oh my God, will I burn from the iron or not? The Eight of Cups with that eclipse, to me, adds sort of a timing aspect. Not an astrological, like when's the next eclipse, although people who are versed in astrology might be able to do that. But more, you know, how long does it take? I can't remember from the last one that occurred here. But I don't know if it was like 30 minutes. It wasn't a particularly long amount of time from the beginning to the end. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was just sitting there waiting for it to finally lock into place or something. I can't remember. The Eight of Cups. I expect it's just going to have the usual. Well, here they're calling it Exodus. Like you're leaving to not return. But I can see that it's what it's saying here to some extent. It's saying, choosing a certain path toward that Hierophant. So to me, this set of cards end up being like an initiation. There's the Eight of Cups. You're choosing a path toward that Hierophant, and that you will be learning, and then you will be judged. It says this card examines the rejection of what was too costly, the breaking of old ties, the search for new meaning, new attachments or goals. And I do see the Eight of Cups as just in general as a search for new meaning, or the go find yourself kind of card. A sad farewell, fear of uncertainty, fear of despair and doubt about the future. Getting rid of unnecessary things, trying to update. Let's see what the Hierophant says. So again, it feels like initiation. You go through the learning, and then you have some judge that determines whether you pass the test, whether you're just, whether what you've studied has made you worthy to go further. The Hierophant, how interesting, it says sanctuary. And the picture definitely looks kind of like sanctuary, although the expression on the old man's face is on the severe side. It says, you have come to seek knowledge in the ancient green grove, where the branches of centuries-old giant trees intertwine with a canopy overhead. In this temple of nature, people learn to distinguish evil from good. This is where they come to honor ancestors and gods, marry and keep their traditions. Here they come with their joys and sorrows. You came here to find a mentor, and he went out to meet you. Listen to his words. This is the wisdom of centuries and countless generations who lived before you. He speaks with the voices of the old gods. You're a student. Be patient and attentive to comprehend the science of living among the people, to be moral and compassionate, industrious and inspirational. Find your place in the world and improve yourself. Let your spirit be worthy of your mentor. So this is actually quite apropos of something I would kind of only say here, which is ancestor experience I just had earlier today, which I did ancestor explorations because of issues that I have with grief. And I have been revisiting each line of ancestors to do further work, kind of healing their grief is the idea, healing grief they've experienced that may have kind of been passed along to me. And that hasn't been a problem with two of my lines of ancestors, but today I was trying to connect with one line of ancestors. This particular line of ancestors, there is one person who has stepped forward as, I think of as a helper to me in terms of helping this line with their grief. And so she met me, but made it clear that I am not to have further interaction with that line of ancestors, and I think it's because this is probably where the majority of the grief is coming from, is from this line of ancestors. There's something there that requires that I completely clear my own grief before I do anything further with them. So she is like my Hierophant, and is more welcoming than this Hierophant. He's got his arms open, but his face is very severe. But essentially, she said, you have your own healing to do, and took me back to a place where I had done healing with this line of ancestors. And I feel like we took a baby step forward, and essentially after that she said, come back to me every day. Come back to me every day. And it's the three, actually. It's her, there's a little boy, and there's a dragon. And I'm to come back to that pool where you're supposed to leave all of your griefs and sorrows of this life, all of the difficulties you don't want to carry forward to future generations. I am to, and I don't have children, so I can't carry them forward to future generations, but to have any more interaction with this line of ancestors, I have to definitely, absolutely do my own grief work, is essentially what I'm being told. And so it's very much like this, the Eight of Cups, the aspect of grief and moving forward. If I'm going to move forward, then I have to accept the teaching of this ancestor and pass her standards, whatever they may be. I don't think it will have anything to do with burning from iron, but a judgment must occur if I am to go forward. Some kind of weighing or determining of readiness. So very interesting that these cards came up. All right, you are amazing if you have stuck with me and listened to this for this long. Yeah, super amazing to listen to me ramble. But I think this is a really interesting deck. I think it's worthy of the ramble, and I think it could be a beginner deck, but it also, it goes in different directions. It goes in different directions, and I'm not sure if I'll use it just for everyday readings. One thing I was not expecting was the kind of 3-card reading I just got that was referring to things shamanic or initiatory. And so it might, I thought I was just getting another deck that would be maybe fun to use for love readings or for any everyday readings. And now I'm questioning whether that is the case, or whether it's actually this little $17 to $18 deck is really a little deeper than I had anticipated from it. All right, everybody. Take care, and thanks again for hanging out with me. Bye-bye.